So in addition to your own experience, I'm hearing that there are other indicators in society, organizations and research and so on and so forth, which you've just cursorily talked about now. The question is, would you like to elaborate on that? Do you think that's appropriate, or would you like to get right now into the orientation shift, into what seems to me to be the grist for your mill at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes and be brief about it, but I would like to talk about the background for this orientation shift, what I call the inferential funnel. That I think the thing that's going to drive multimedia, that's going to drive its acceptance, its demand, both in the consumer level and at the higher level. Stick that back in your ear. Will have to do with the organization, the context that's developing in organizations and businesses around the country, around the world. What we're learning about how it is that people learn. And it's going to be a blending of these two that create the kind of marketing context for product differentiation of multimedia products. In other words, that what I want to talk about really is part of the fabric for understanding the context of how to market and sell multimedia, I believe, in the future. That there will be both a concern for what works in the market statistically, and what works in the market statistically and what's ecological with respect to our learning capacities are going to be the same thing soon. In our work in travels and research, both within the organizational science side of this funnel, and there's three parts to this funnel. There's organization science, individual well-being, educational research. That at the organizational science level, whether we're talking about big companies like IBM or Apple or General Motors, Hewlett-Packard, Kodak, these companies are all at the board level and throughout their organization starting to ask questions about how it is that they can become a better learning organization. They're beginning to realize that, and there's many other companies involved in this group that's starting to emerge in the world, that the key to how well an organization performs really has to do with how well it's learning. That there's very few things that are as important as its human resources, and the number one attribute of its human resources is how well its human resources are learning. So it's beginning to emerge that a key facet of profitability, of organizational well-being, if you will, is how well the organization as a whole is facilitating its systemic and individual capacities for learning. This is a critical point because it's the capacities for learning which we want to get into later. That I would say right now our entire educational systems and most of our technology is evolved towards producing knowers, towards producing a set of definable skills. And what's emerging here, and the significance of it to multimedia, is that organizations are beginning to realize that there's nothing more relevant to their success than someone's ongoing capacities for learning, which isn't the same thing as what they already know. This is being confirmed and echoed through organizations like, or through universities like Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Oxford. At Harvard, you know Chris Argyris as an example. Bill Isaacs at MIT, Peter Senge, who just put out one of the most popular business books in some time called The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of a Learning Organization. These universities are now studying from an academic point of view rather than the more empirical point of view of businesses at the board level. What is it that makes a company healthy? And they're coming to the same conclusion, that a company become more learning oriented, that the organization itself at many different levels start to focus on its capacities for learning as a fundamental contribution to how it is that this organization is going to survive. This is also being echoed by some of the more popular consultants today. In fact, Deming, who perhaps I think everybody's probably heard of by this point in terms of his work in Japan, and Tom Peters have come up with a couple of phrases that I think are really powerful. Deming's in particular is my favorite phrase in the entire business literature today, which is the only sustainable advantage of an organization is learning. Meaning that people are going to change, the human resources are going to change. As we know from watching the papers, reorganizations are going to occur every other week, every other month. customers are going to change, technology is going to change, where it is that profits are going to change, measurement systems, economic systems to measure profitability, to measure performance are going to change. The only thing that's got any constancy, which isn't very constant, is learning. That the only sustainable advantage when you look at all the different variables going on in an organization is learning. How well that system as a whole, and therefore the people within it, are extending their capacities for learning. This translates into all kinds of different language within the business community that we don't really have a lot of time to go into. But it's pretty clear that there's no better customer than a learner, somebody who's trying to really understand the kind of value that somebody's bringing. No better vendor than a learner who's trying to understand what it is that they can bring to their customer in a way that will actually meet their needs better. And the same can be said for the way, what better employee than a learner, or what better manager, and so forth, and it goes on. In fact, I think one of the organizational premises that's really going to be helpful as this unfolds is that if you were to look at an organization, for example, let's take De Anza, this college that we're at right now, and scoop out all of the people and take them out, put them out on the street, and look at what's left, the buildings, the hallways, the doors, the cubicles, the telephone systems, the economic measurement systems that are in place, the way the trash is collected, the way that inter-office mail is handled. Once you take the people out, you could look at an organization and say, what's left is a matrix of mediation systems. That how well these mediation systems facilitate learning in all the different participants is key to how well the overall organization functions in terms of its profit and its sustainability. So I want to go on. We don't have time to stay on the business track too much longer. And I hope I'm not stretching what's relevant with respect to multimedia. I want to say that, again, coming to understand how the world views learning and the needs of a learner, the needs of somebody who's performing, the needs of somebody who's learning, and we'll get into those distinctions, are critical to the design of multimedia experiences, multimedia environments. The other thing that's actually rather amazing is that from an entirely different track, from a point of view of what is it that makes an individual healthy and whole, able to be more creative, able to be more self-responsible, able to be more present to other individuals, able to lead a healthier life, to deal with family and crisis better, that, in other words, the studies and research going on in individual well-being sciences come to the same point that the studies and research being done in organizational well-being sciences come to. That is, that how well an individual is learning, how well their capacity for learning has been awakened, and they're able to meet the experiences that they're having in the context of the performance of their work, or in the context of the way that they're relating to their child or their spouse. That how well they're awake and alive to this capacity of learning we're speaking of is directly related to their health. Equally to the business and individual well-being, or on another thread, as I mentioned earlier, is educational research. One of the things that's been happening over the past 10 or 15 years is an entirely new paradigm is starting to emerge within the educational community about what it means to facilitate learning. And we have development stages, Piaget's development stages, transfer of learning issues, critical thinking issues, constructionism, where education is now viewing the creation of environments in which learners or students are placed in them so as to be compelled to want to create something which is their learning environment, rather than being stuck in a box, or dunked in a box, so to speak. One of the major things that's emerged in recent times with respect to education is learning style theory, which is based on the notion that every mother knows that every child or every person learns different. They have a different style, a different mix ratio of cognitive biases, sensory biases, particular vocabulary levels, particular ways in which presentations will work or not work. And education is coming to this, although it's very difficult to implement due to the way that classrooms and what have you are. Some other new theories that are coming along that are pointing at this same edge is work like Howard Gardner's on multiple intelligences, or frames of intelligence, as he's called them. And of course, everybody's heard today of this big learning to learn bandwagon that's starting to emerge in this country.